Whenever a person thinks about Gettysburg, naturally the first thing you're going to think about is the Civil War battle that took place here in 1863. But the history in Gettysburg didn't stop there during those hot July days in 1863. Right now, I'm in the National Cemetery here in Gettysburg, and people may be surprised to learn that it's not just Civil War soldiers who are buried here. Right now I'm walking amongst the headstones and I can see soldiers from World War I, World War II. There are people here who were buried that served in Korea and Vietnam. And today we're going to be looking at the very interesting story of one individual who is laid to rest here in Gettysburg. Here's what I'm talking about. So here's the final resting place of a guy by the name of Harry Mariner, who was in the U.S. Marine Corps and died on October 9th, 1942. Wow. Here's another one. Mike Pompeel is, I think, how you would pronounce his name. Died October 7th, 1944. And if we go up here, this marks the final resting place of a man named John Klister, whose date of death is registered as June 9th, 1944.
So we're at the Gettysburg National Cemetery at the grave of John Klister with his helmet. And one of the little known facts, or seldomly known facts for outside people, is that the Gettysburg National Cemetery is not just for Civil War soldiers. They have soldiers from every war after the Civil War, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea. And this helmet was found in Europe, and it's an MP platoon helmet. John Klister was in the 29th Division, and of course the 29th Division landed on Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. John Klister was from Pennsylvania, and he actually was in the Army before World War II. He was in the National Guard, I should say. And when his unit was mobilized, he went over to England and then to France for the invasion. He was reported missing at first. And then on June 9th, his body was discovered. So the way the graves registration people worked were, if they didn't know the exact time of death or date of death, they would use the date when they recovered the body. This helmet, as I said, was discovered in Europe. One of the big museum owners over there had bought a helmet collection, and he discovered the name inside. And it's very hard to read, and I don't even think we're going to attempt to do it because you have to get perfect lighting on it, and it's barely etched in there, but it's the name Klister, and it's an unusual name. And he was able to discover that Klister was now resting at the Gettysburg National Cemetery. So he contacted me and said, "Eric, I think this helmet should come to Gettysburg to your museum." Now, why are there D-Day soldiers and other soldiers buried in this cemetery? A lot of the D-Day soldiers you think of being buried at Normandy. Well, in 1948, there was a series of temporary graves at Normandy, and they decided to consolidate those cemeteries. There was the two in St. Mary Glees, one in Blowsville, and Omaha Beach, and they consolidated all those cemeteries into one. And so families were notified, I believe this was 1948, and they had the choice of either letting their loved ones lie in Normandy or bringing them home. And they could send them to a national cemetery near them, or if they wanted to pick up their own expense once they got here, they could hire a local funeral director if they had a family plot that they wanted to go in. Many people elected, it's been a couple years, and so they didn't want to open up old wounds, so a lot of them left them lie in Normandy with their comrades. Some people chose to bring them back to a national cemetery. As I said, Gettysburg is a national cemetery. So the Klister family wanted their son to come home, but still rest in a national cemetery. So the Klister family was from Western PA, and this was the cemetery that they chose. It was a Pennsylvania cemetery, and so over the years, I found his grave, and over the years I've placed wreaths here. I try to decorate it on Memorial Day, and so he can be remembered, both in our museum and at our cemetery. Now, the other part of the story is about 2 months ago, through the magic of Facebook, his family contacted me. I got an email from his family stating that they had some items and they would like to meet with me. So his niece came to see me, and she brought some photographs of John Klister and some newspaper articles and some V-mail, and they donated it to the museum, and I was very happy about that. And they were very happy that his helmet was here in Gettysburg at his final resting spot. So that is the story of how a helmet from the 29th Division, a named helmet, went from the battlefields of Normandy to the Gettysburg Museum of History.
All right, I have to say, it's pretty moving to be here at the final resting place of John Klister, and to be right here with his helmet that was with him whenever he passed away. Now, Erik mentioned that the Klister family showed up to his museum with some other items that are tied to John Klister. So we're going to head back over to the museum and take a look at a few of those things. Well, here are a few of the newspaper clippings that have to do with John Klister. So here it says Arnold, soldier listed as missing, and then the confirmation of his death. Arnold, soldier, dies in France. So, man, that just had to be so sad for his family and so many other families. And here are a few pictures of John Klister. And that one is one of the studio photographs. And also part of this collection are some pieces of V-mail. So one letter is written to his mother and one to his sister Olga. And the story behind the V-mail is a pretty interesting one.
V-mail was a way of limiting the amount of bulky packages and bundles of mail coming back from Europe. And what would happen was, all mail from soldiers had to go through censors anyway, because they were conscientious of possibly giving out too much information and that kind of information falling into the hands of the enemy. So they would go through a censor, and there's some stuff crossed out. I don't know if that was done with a censor or if that was, I believe that was probably just a mistake. But what they would do is they would photograph these letters on microfiche, and that way it would be just almost like a roll of film, and then that was sent back to the United States, and that way they could get tens of thousands of letters into a very small roll of film, or several rolls of film. And it was one of the ways of reducing cargo coming back from Europe. That the ships going back and forth to the United States from Europe, the space was limited. They needed it for war materials, and it was just one of those ingenious things that they came up with during World War II. And again, these items came from the family, and we are very grateful to the family of John Klister for donating these items to the Gettysburg Museum of History.